Siemaneczko w 23 części, tak? 23? Tak, 23 części BioShock. Dobra, monitoring. Musimy uważać, bo no, pojawił się ciężki kaliber przeciwników. Tam gdzieś się kręcą i mnie tylko wkurzają. Omijać zabezpieczeń. Tak, kamery i wieżyczki potrzebują o wiele więcej czasu. No na razie, no nie, no nic więcej tutaj, kurde, mam już wszystko wykupione, fajne rzeczy są, ale muszę z nich zrezygnować, no. Dobra, podniesiemy to, oczywiście.
She was asking about magnetic locks and some such. I played it coy, but she took wise. After she showed me round her backyard, I gave her directions to Kyburza's tool shop. Rapture's gone to hell, but sometimes the great chain still cuts you a break.
Ja, dobra. Przeszukaj monitoring. Dobra. No, czyli dobrze, że wcześniej nie próbowałem tu iść, bo nie było sensu. Jacyś panowie tutaj są na górze, pewnie tak. Dzień dobry. Z bliska. Tak. Dobranoc. Zwyrodnialcu. Akurat to nie był ten najgorszy. Dobra, tu nie ma co brać. Ja tak się zastanawiam nad zamrażaniem tamtych gnoi. O, proszę, proszę. Tych takich owłosionych, takich zajebiście twardych gnoi. Wiecie, jak ich zamrozić i może potem łatwiej i szybciej padną, nie?
A man builds a city at the bottom of the sea. That's a marvel. Another man happens to be on a plane that crash lands on the same city in the middle of the ocean. Why, that sounds more like a miracle.
Nie no, zbieg okoliczności, no, przypadek. Chyba, że ja o czymś nie wiem, ale no, tak bym obstawiał. Dobranoc. Dobra, pytanie, czy musimy na górę wejść, czy na dół? Cholera, wiesz, nie pamiętam. Nie, na górę. Dobra, to idziemy na górę. To będzie tutaj? O! A tu idzie... Siostrzyczka, dobra. Dobra, czekajcie, to musimy się nią zająć. Dobra. Okej. Nie to chciałem, come on! Dobra. Pięknie. Dobranoc. Easy poszło. Easy, dobry plan i elegancko idzie. Nie panikuj. Nie panikuj.
I've seen such terrible things.
Thank you.
And done worse myself. Thank you for reminding me that the light of the world has not yet been snuffed out. I am sending a little one to help you on your way.
Okej. Pluszowego misia, który znajdziesz w ogrodzie obfitości. Spoko. Ogrody obfitości tutaj były. I ja bym się przeszedł do tych ogrodów. Tylko nie pamiętam dokładnie w którym miejscu. Co to jest? No nie, bo tutaj to mnie... Nie, to nie jest na pewno to miejsce. Dobra, poczekajcie, no spokojnie, ogarniemy to. Chciałbym znaleźć te... Znaczy znaleźć... One gdzieś tu muszą być. O, proszę. To sobie weźmiemy, bo to się na pewno przyda. O! Jak miło, dziękuję. Naprawdę, skarbie, dziękuję. 4 zastrzyki, zarąbiście. No i oczywiście 200 Adama. Pięknie. A, więcej nie wcisnę min. No dobra, trudno. Jakoś to przeżyję. Na pewno rozwinięcie Ewy sobie weźmiemy. Przyda się. Miejsce na tonik bojowy też się przyda. Zimno powoduje mniejsze obrażenia. No dobra, nic lepszego nie mamy, więc niech będzie to. Czy coś jeszcze więcej chcemy? Może na razie się wstrzymam. I zobaczymy, może to przekminie. Dobra, na razie się wstrzymamy. No. Zastanowimy się później. Znaczy, między odcinkami może coś nad czymś pomyślę. Dobra, teraz interesuje nas tutaj to miejsce. Dzień dobry. Także tatuśków mamy odhaczonych. Fajnie było ten komentarz twórców ogarnąć. Dobra. Do warsztatów mamy pójść. Okej, tam chodzi sobie tatusiek. Oj, czy ja chcę jakieś przedmioty kupić? Niekoniecznie. Może. A co tutaj jest? Mogą być jakieś fajne rzeczy. Dobra. Nie, chcę to jak najszybciej ogarnąć. Dobra. Tak jest. Aha, zrób tutaj porządek. No właśnie, i ona jest naprawdę podstępna, ta menda. Dawaj azot. Dobra. Tak, jednak to się całkiem dobrze sprawdza z tym azotem. No, kruchy przeciwnik się robi słabszy. Dobra. Tu z tatuśkiem nie chcę żadnej zadymy. I też jacyś troszkę ulepszeni są, nie? Niech sobie tu spokojnie chodzi. Brać go raczej nie chcę z sobą, chociaż może to nie jest takie głupie wcale. Co my tutaj mamy? Okej, spokojnie. Ciastko, dobrze. Mamy save, bardzo chętnie. Dobra. Okej. Co mamy w środku? Granaty, zajebiście. Bardzo pyszne rzeczy. Na wieżyczkę się zgliczował, a może weźmiemy go, kurde, co o tym myślicie? Może chodź tutaj do nas, tak. Dobra. Mamy wszystko ogarnięte, nie? Dobrze. A, przepraszam. Czy ja coś z tego chcę? Tego autohakera to bym chciał, kurde. No. Okej. No dobra, niech będzie jeszcze jeden. Dobra, zawsze się przyda. No w razie W. Chodź tutaj za mną, przyjacielu. Szafeczki są git. O, baksy zawsze, miło. Dobra, to jest czysto. Auć. Zrób tam porządek. Nie no, tutaj nic nie chcę zmieniać. Dobra.
Mr. Ryan to hand Fontaine 226 over to Atlas's boys as a peace offering. But the stupid sod won't listen to reason. Instead, he's just splicing his mob up, giving them more and tougher plasmids. There's an arms race on here in Rapture, but it's not about who can build the best guns and the biggest bombs. It's about who can become less of a man and more of a monster.
Okej, jeszcze jest z nami. Nie próbuję się odłączyć od stada. Dobra. Nie wiem, czy tu mogę skoczyć. Czy tam jest pod... A, tam ktoś leży, dobra. Nie, zapiszmy, bo się boję, że kurde, jakoś zginę w głupi sposób. Więc wolę zapisać. O, dobra. A, tylko nie A, dobra. Bałem się, że on tu będzie chciał wejść. Na szczęście nie chce. Dzień dobry. Okej.
What a balmy dream. Some kind of fruit tree spinning like a top. And it was pouring juice down Ryan's throat, choking the bastard. But it wasn't a tree, really. When I looked closer, it was the core control. The gizmo that feeds the maglocks on Ryan's gate. You can't cut off the power. It comes right from the volcanic vents. Ryan always gets his juice. But I suppose you could drown the son of a bitch in it.
Być może. O, dobra. To myślę, że... A, niech będzie, walniemy sobie. Jeszcze jedną kadencję, chociaż nie wiem czy to było potrzebne, ale mamy Ewet w brud. Chociaż jest zasadniczy problem. Taki, że on się tu chyba z nami nie przeciśnie, no właśnie. No i to jest smuteczek delikatny. Ale może będzie tam wiernie czekał. Dobra, apteczki fajnie. Aha.
One charge of nitroglycerin in my office. That will serve as the catalyst. Now I need 4R34 lead shield wire stubs to pass the circuit. Then a half can of ionic gel. That's the pretty Betty of the mix. Should send the core into
Dobra, a co to jest?
push power down the line and trigger the circuit
To
breaker on
obrażeń
Ryan's gate.
uzyskane w wyniku badań. Co? Zwiększa premię do obrażeń?
Half of Rapture.
A, to nie, to weźmiemy. To będzie na pewno fajniejsze niż to, tak mi się wydaje.
What a balmy
No.
dream. Some kind of fruit tree spinning like a top. And it was pouring juice down Ryan's throat, choking the bastard. But it wasn't a tree, really. When I looked closer, it was the core control. The gizmo that
Zajebiście.
feeds the maglocks on Ryan's gate. You can't cut off the power. It comes right from the volcanic vents. Ryan always gets his juice. But I suppose you could drown the son of a bitch in it.
Dobra. Nie mam wymagając... Jezus! Czego mi brakuje? Dobra, teraz ty musisz doprowadzić jego dzieło do końca. Zbierz wszystkie potrzebne części do warsztatu, gdzie znajduje się obudowa. Umieść części w obudowie, aby dokończyć bombę. Znajdź 2 ćwiartki żelu, znajdź ładunki. A, czyli teraz dostałem tą Dobra, dobra, ale weźmy sobie komentarz. Tak jest, poprosimy.
The moment you boot up BioShock, you can feel the story grab hold of you. A plane crashes at sea, a mysterious lighthouse, a sprawling city beneath the ocean. Hooking the player from the first touch without overwhelming him with convoluted RPG mechanics was key to the success of the game and the skillful ramping up of BioShock's legendary gameplay.
Tak jest.
BioShock has an amazing opening sequence that I can't imagine the game without it, with you know, the plane and sort of the crash. But I understand that didn't come online until like the very end of development. Sean, is that true?
We had a couple of really depressing playtests. We had built all these systems. We thought we were doing a good job of like giving basically people a playground to play with and things to do. And when we had a playtest, we didn't realize how bad of a job we were doing in exposing those systems to the player, because we were so in these systems and in our own heads, we had no idea that we just weren't facing them towards the player at all. So after that playtest, we took a long, cold look at what we were doing and realized that we had to introduce we were confident enough in the systems that they were going to be fun and meaningful to the player, but we really had to think about how we were going to introduce these systems to the player, and in such a way that they understand why the systems were there. Like, you can't ship a README file with the game and expect people to read it. Like, it has to be part of the experience. So the challenge is, how do you introduce people to these systems, but do it in such a way that it fits within the narrative? So we had to integrate all of these things into the story cleanly, so that the player felt like it was one smooth experience. And I think the zap 'em and whack 'em thing was one of those.
And the 1-2 punch.
Yeah, the 1-2 punch that came out of that.
The plane sequence at the beginning, I heard a story that like a programmer put that together in like a day or two, and it was a very last minute thing, right?
It was, so we had done a focus test, and we had it was one of the most depressing experiences in my life, because we were very close to being finished, and it was basically giving people what essentially became the demo, and people played it, and it was in Boston, and we were sort of behind these glass windows, all these sort of Boston guys are like, this is a wicked piece of shit. They hated it, and they were making fun of it, and they were saying, it's like watching some guys and dolls getting, beating each other up, and it's the stupidest thing they've ever seen. And we thought we were in pretty good shape at that point. And I remember the focus test guy was like sort of like a doctor giving me the bad news.
Right.
Sorry, Ken, you better get your affairs in order.
Right.
And we all came into work the next day, and we were like, what are we gonna do? And we're all pretty depressed, but I think we started talking, and as we talked, we started thinking about, what are they saying to us? What are these people saying to us? What we think there's something there. How are they missing it? And we decided that maybe they didn't understand who they were and who their role as a character, who their role in the world was, because the game at that point started with you in the ocean, floating in the ocean after the plane crash. And
the crash still was in the fiction, it just wasn't shown.
You just didn't see it, so you didn't have the voiceover saying, my parents always said I was going to do great things or whatever that. They didn't show the plane crash. We didn't establish a time period, because the plane is critical to establishing. You're smoking a cigarette, it's very 1960s looking. All that stuff was established. It wasn't established, so we decided we had no time and no money and so we sort of came up with a script. I wrote some lines, a line, I think. Nate, one of our artists, recorded the line. Steven and Sean and those guys got to work on building this very simple sequence, which was relatively simple sequence. And then the plane crash actually happens over the BioShock logo we already had. But we wrote a radio play behind that with altitude of the crash, and that I think set the emotional and the people screaming
Ciekawe.
in terror on the plane crash. That set the emotional tenor much better and explained who the player was. And all of a sudden, we released. Then I think the next real encounter we had was people playing the demo, public encounter, and all of a sudden it was a very different experience.
No,
for people.
I remember even back in the day, I think we did a thing on TV where you kind of talked about it, and it was like that night, and I remember that night, like people on the forums were just like going nuts. And even though the game had, I think, had a lot of press attention, when people finally got to play it and go through that sequence, I just remember there was this mass sort of excitement around it, and then the game shipped only a few weeks after that, right, or a month after that?
A week later, a few days later.
It's amazing, like now, to hear that, like, literally like a month before the game came out, like the playing sequence came online. I mean, it was that late.
Trochę tak.
Yeah, well, we still had to go through certification and all
Yeah,
that.
but it's like within,
it wasn't far. It wasn't far. It was really last minute, and it was one of those things where like you really shouldn't be putting in content that late. Yeah. But we felt it. We were so close to having something good that we just rolled the dice on it, and we worked really hard on it. Like we worked really hard. I remember how much time I spent on just that recorded of altitude. I can still hear the different version of that in my head. There's been so much time on that stuff, and these guys were working on getting the animations right and
the scene was shot in engine, but we decided to pre-render it so that we had to do less QA on it.
Right.
There was it wasn't going to be some like weird streaming error or crash error.
Wow.
It was just like we're just going to show the video. Yeah.
And it's interesting because once you start in the ocean, we had this experience of testing a lot with the water effects and how beautiful Steven's water effects were. People didn't realize they were out of a cutscene at that point, and so they would just sit there and stare. And then they pick up the controller. And they pick up the controller, and all of a sudden they realize they were controlling things. But that, as Sean said, that part of the plane is not actually interactive. It was done in the engine, but we just filmed it.
Now, as people were playing through the game and you were testing it, I'm sure there was debate about, when would you introduce these plasmids, what would the ramp be? Did that change at all, sort of as you got towards the end of development, about like, oh, we're going to give people the gun at this point, or it's like, we're going to trigger these plasmids at this point? Like, how did that work?
So, like, we moved guns around. Like, for instance, there was a big debate about, originally you found a gun in the lighthouse, a pistol in the lighthouse.
Oh,
in the very
right
beginning.
there,
And because it's a shooter, right? Like, what the hell? And we had a lot of debates about it, and I feel that it was important that we didn't do that, because the fact that you sort of go through a lot of the experience without having the distraction of a gun is important to getting you immersed in the world. Because when you have all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? But you don't have the hammer, so you just sort of had to take in the world and have that feeling of fear. And like I know when you saw that splicer bounding around on the ceiling, that you couldn't do anything about it, and that had even though that's
those are those moments, right? Like I remember when I played Unreal for the first time, where it's like you're trapped and there's a monster and you can't do it, and the lights go out. It's like that's the moment with the splicer where you're like, I want to do something but I can't, and that evokes an emotion.
Pamiętamy tą scenę.
I remember we kept, moving where the machine gun appeared around and where various plasmids appeared around. It was a real, it's a real fine-tuning process.
Yeah, and it gave us an opportunity, like especially with the shotgun, to really present the weapons, like put some space between them.
It's a moment when you finally.
Yeah, I think
we get the shotgun Paul sequence.
Paul Helquist was he put the sequence together for the when you see the shotgun laying in the pool of light. Like every game developer knows what that means. The minute you pick that thing up, something's going to happen. But it was still a very effective way, as I'm remembering it, to, oh look, I've been waiting for this thing, I'm going to pick it up, and now you have an immediate opportunity to use it. But at the same time, we're trying to ramp up the tension level by having the splicers kind of on the outside of the light, so you can't really see them, and then coming in one at a time and attacking you.
And we had very few tools to really control how the splicers acted. So how they were set up and how the environment was lit was really important.
Well, there's even other things like when you get the TK plasmid, I don't think we had a lot of physical space and opportunity and time to really present that. So we came up with the narrative that it was the doctor's office and he used TK to practice tennis, and we had the turret in there that threw tennis balls at you. So if you wanted to, you could catch the tennis balls and throw them, and you could knock things down. I think it revealed pickups that you could then pull to yourself with TK. But we're always trying to think of like little backstories that we could do. It doesn't have to be as involved as the shotgun ambush. Sometimes it's just, oh, let's take a grenade turret and turn it into a tennis ball turret.
Because we want to, yeah, like, because I remember, like, the impulse was, you know, I've been to dentist's office, and there's always some, like, weird aspect of the dentist's personality they always want to get through their office, you know? They always have to have their hobby featured in some way, and so we saw an opportunity there to both feature this, he's a tennis nut, and teach TK at the same time.
Okej. No, i za to właśnie lubię komentarze twórców. Dobra, no brakuje nam dużo części, wciul części nam brakuje. I takie są niestety fakty. Tatusiek tutaj jest z nami. Kurde. Żelu, no. Kurde, no nie mamy wyjścia, tylko musimy się za to wziąć, nie? I tyle. Dobra, ale to myślę, że w przyszłym odcinku. Pytanie, gdzie będzie najlepiej się tym zająć. W sumie tutaj tego nie sprawdził. A, nie mogłem tu się dostać. Aha. Czy ja będę w ogóle musiał zmienić tą lokację? Nie no, może gdzieś to znajdziemy po drodze. Ale to na przyszły odcinek. Na dzisiaj to tyle, także trzymajcie się i na razie.